Hi, in today's tutorial, I will be giving an overview of network load balancing feature on Windows Server 2019. Then I will try to install and configure the network load balancing cluster. What is a cluster? So a cluster is a group of independent servers interconnect with dedicated network to work as one centralized data processing resource. So cluster improves system availability for the users. It is aggregate performance and fault tolerance. Cluster distributing the workload of network across all connected network. What is network load balancing? The network load balancing feature distributes traffic across several servers by using the TCP/IP networking protocol. By combining two or more computers that are running application into a single virtual cluster. Network load balance provides reliability and performance for web servers and other mission critical servers. So what's the hardware requirements we need in order to install the network load balancing feature? We are looking for all hosts on the cluster must reside on the same subnet. So all the servers that you have must have the same subnet or in the same network ID. There are no restriction on the number of network adapter on each host, and different hosts can have a different number of adapters. Within each cluster, all network adapter must either be a multicast or unicast. Network load balancing does not support a mixed environment of multicast and unicast within a single cluster. If you are using the unicast mode, the network adapter that is used to handle client to cluster traffic must support changing its media access control or MAC address. So what about the software requirement to run the network load balancing? So only TCP/IP can be used on the adapter for which network load balancing is enabled on each host. The IP addresses of the server in the cluster must be static. So we are going to configure our network adapter in the static IP setting. So here I want to talk about some terms related to the network load balancing feature on Windows Server 2019. We do have something called one of the features on network load balancing is availability and fault tolerance. Availability, servers are often assigned service level agreements which specify the level of availability those servers or services must maintain. Like we need to maintain, for example, we need to maintain 99% uptime. Fault tolerance. To make a server more fault tolerant, you should first look at what components are the most likely to fail and implement technology to make a system less likely to fail. We do have a term called heartbeats. Heartbeat is the detection of a failure of a cluster nodes by sending packets known as a heartbeat by the network load balancing. So let's say we do have two web servers, server 1, server 2, and the incoming traffic are distributing among these two servers. If one of them is down for any reason, the network load balancing feature will detect this by sending a continuous heartbeat and make sure that the server healthy and good. If it's not, the network load balance will direct the traffic to the one that is working. So when a node is added or removed from a cluster, so if the server is removed, we call this convergence. So we need to configure three types of parameters with the NLB. We do have the host parameters, define which each node can do in NLB cluster. Cluster parameters configure the network load balancing cluster as a whole. And we do have the port rules, control what ports the NLB cluster services and how requests are bounced across all servers based on the port and protocol. We do have a term called affinity, determines how the servers are going to balance the load. Use affinity settings when you use multiple host filter mode. So filter mode specify which host can respond to requests. So talking about this figure here, we see the network load balancing cluster. So the end users are trying to access the website by sending incoming traffic HTTP from their devices such as laptop, computer, smartphone, and on the server we do have a load balancing cluster configured with a virtual IP. So the incoming traffic coming to the cluster, to the load balancing cluster, and the load balancing cluster will distribute the network traffic to its different servers. So we have web server 1, web server 2. Both of these nodes or servers have the internet information services installed and configured. So both of them are running HTTP server. So both of them are web here, and the load balancing cluster are distributing the traffic. This will create availability and fault tolerance. So it would reduce the incoming traffic on one server. So just imagine that you do have only you do not have the load balancing cluster here, and all these devices are sending web traffics to this server, let's say server 1. If that's the case, the more the user become, the less the speed, it's slowing the server, and it could ultimately crash the server. So by having a load balancing, we are creating fault tolerance, availability, and distribution of network. And we also see here the heartbeat. The heartbeat are checking the health of each server. So the load balancing cluster are sending heartbeat to each server to make sure that this server is up. So let's say, for example, if server 1 is down, as you see now, it's crashed for any reason. So this one is not reachable anymore. So the heartbeat will be sent, checking the health, and conclude that this server is down. So the traffic will be distributed to web server 2. Also check the same subnet. We have we have class A IP address, and it's all the IP address, our nodes, and also the cluster virtual IP. It's located within the same subnets. So here I'm on my server 1. If I go to my control panel and networking and sharing center, if I check just to check the adapter setting, if I go to Ethernet 1, right click, properties, and IPv4, I do have a static IP of 10.10.10.2, and my server 2, if I go to control panel and going to again to the network network and sharing center and checking the adapter setting, Ethernet 1, right click, properties, IPv4, properties, and its IP address is 10.10.10.3. So we have 2 and 3. So I can also check by ping. So from my going to the command prompt, let me ping server 1. So to make sure we are connected to each other to create the network load balancing cluster. So 10.10.10.2. So it's successfully pinging. So now let's go ahead and add the network load balancing feature using the server manager. So once you are in the server manager, click on manage, then add rules and features. So here click next, click on next. Select destination server is my server, click on next, and server, select server rule, leave it as it is, click on next. Here within the features, find your network load balancing. So as you see, this is the feature, network load balancing. Select this, add features, click on next, then click on install. If you select automatically restarting, so if this service required a restart, it will be automatically restarting your server once the feature is installed. So click on install. So installation succeed on my server 1. So hit on close. So here I'm on my server 2. Also make sure that if you want to add any server to this network load balancing cluster, you must have this feature installed on your server. So from my server 2, I'm going to add the feature by using, instead of server manager, I'm going to use the Piwershell. So writing command install -windows feature, a space, the name of the feature you are looking for, so it's the network load balancing. Then I'm going to include the management tool. So it's successful. Now I do have the network load balancing feature on my server, web server 2. So going back to server 1, now I want to add the cluster. So from server manager, select tools, and then to the network load balancing manager. Now here I want to click on right click, new cluster. Now we have to add the host. So my first one is 10.2. Click on connect, and I'm selecting the Ethernet, the one, the second local area network adapter. So this one, click on next. Here you can select the priority, the less than we have up to 32, because we can make up to 32 server for the load balancing. And also we have the priority, so the less the number it is, the better priority it will give to this server. So for this I'm selecting 1, make sure the default state started, and click on next. Now I'm going to add my cluster IP address. So here 10.10.10.1, the subnet is the default class A. Click on OK. I'm going to click on next. Here, in case I have a full name, this is in the DNS configuration. Select multicast, click on next, and then in the rules here, the default are all open from 0 to 65,535. We can remove this default one, add a new rule. I'm testing my web server, so I can put 80 to 80 here. TCP, click on OK, and also I can add 443. HTTPS secure, and TCP, click on OK, click finish, and as you see, now my first server, it's waiting for banding operation, it says here. So we are going to wait for this server to converge. In the meantime, I can right click on my cluster, then I click add host to cluster with the same process. So basically I'm going to select my next server here, which is 10.10.10.3, right? Click on connect. So once you see the interface name, select the Ethernet, click on next, click on next. So priority, so you can select whatever priority you want. The less priority, the higher priority. If you select a higher number, mean less priority. So I'm selecting 2, click on next. We have the same rules, HTTP and HTTPS. Click on finish. So we are waiting. It says the status, it says banding, and for our server 1 is converged, so we are going to wait for this. You can click on your cluster, then right click, refresh, then refresh. We're going to wait for a few minutes. So now the both nodes or servers are now converged. So we have 10.10.10.2 and .3, and they are both hosting a web server. Now we can basically test from Windows 10 host and see if the network load balancing is working or distributing traffic properly. So this is my host here. I'm going to open a browser. So here I'm on my browser. Then I'm going to type in the IP address, the cluster IP address. So I'm gonna hit on this IP address, and as you see here, it's successfully showing web server 1. So if I click on refresh, it's web server 1. Now, going back to my network loading balance manager, let's say if I go on the server 1, which is hosting web server 1, and right click, I'm going to say control host, then I'll click on stop. So this server is not working anymore, so it's stopped, and the only one it's working is the server 2. So now we can, going back to the host or the client, and check if the website will change. So from the browser, from my client, I'm going to hit on refresh using the same cluster IP address. Click on refresh, and as you see here, web server 2. So now the traffic, the web traffic, is now directing to the second server in my cluster. So I'm also going to add a DNS record for my network load balancing cluster. So from server manager, go to tools, DNS manager, and from DNS manager, go to your forward lookup zone and your domain name, then right click, new host, host A. Here I'm going to type in the name, so I'm going to call it web, and this is the fully qualified domain now, and the IP address is going to be the IP address of my cluster, so it's 10.10.10.1. Click on add host, okay, and then click on done. Now I'm going to test the fully qualified domain name. So here I'm on my client. Before going to the browser and type in your fully qualified domain name, make sure your DNS static setting is pointing to the server. So from control panel, go to network and sharing center. We are going to check the adapter setting and click on your adapter. Right click properties, and we want to check the IPv4 properties. And here, as you see, we have the local area network connecting to my server, and DNS is not pointing to my server. So I'm going to add my DNS, which is 10.10.10.2, and this is where my this is the IP address of my domain controller, and it has the DNS role installed there. So click on OK, close this. Now open a browser and now you can type in your fully qualified domain name. And here we go. You see your network load balancing, and it's pointing to the cluster IP address. And that should be it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching. Talk to you later. Bye.